Thanks for listening to the Gray Ave Podcast, a show for driven young people with big goals. We meet inspiring people from around the world and learn from them, from entrepreneurship, health, travel, lifestyle, and more. We are also on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher Radio. Rate and write us a review. You can also download each episode on www.grayjabesi.com. Enjoy the show.
Hey, what's up, unicorns? My name is Gray, and this is the Gray Podcast, and this is episode number 33. This is more of a part two to episode 30, which I did with Dr. Jonathan Farley, a well-recognized mathematician. So we talked about other things in that one, and on this specific episode, we covered mathematics and a whole different other areas, also not forgetting one of the subjects that he is popular for at the moment, which is related to the British publications that said math genius develops equation for wiping out ISIS. So I asked him about that, and he elaborates exactly what that's all about. One of the things that I actually picked up for myself is that you can discover new things if you're working in an area that nobody cares about. This is a quote from Dr. Jonathan Farley himself in this podcast. We also went all the way down to his childhood, how he grew up, which was supposed to be the first episode before the second one, but I decided to put the other one first, and this one followed. So I hope it answers all your questions. And also all the questions that you guys sent on social media to ask him that weren't covered on the part one of this were answered in this one. So I hope you got what you expected. And of course, we talked about academia, and Dr. Farley himself helps students to get straight A's in college. And it applies to difficult places like Harvard, and he has a webinar about it, which I'll put a link in the show notes. He has actually been quoted in a book called 15 Secrets Successful People Know About Time Management by Kevin Cruz. Some of you listeners in this podcast, I am sure you are familiar with this book. He quoted people like Mark Cuban and all other great people, and Dr. Jonathan Farley was one of them as a straight A student. And for the new listeners to the podcast who haven't listened to the part one of this, Dr. Jonathan Farley is a world-recognized mathematician, traveler, entrepreneur, among other things. He has been a visiting professor of mathematics at the California Institute of Technology, a science fellow at Stanford University's Center for International Security and Cooperation, a visiting scholar in the Department of Mathematics at Harvard University, a visiting associate professor of applied mathematics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. So I hope that gives you a kind of an idea, but I still recommend you check out the first part of our conversation. It turns out to be one of the most downloaded episodes that I've ever recorded, and it turned out to have thousands of downloads in a period of 2 weeks. So I recommend you check that out, and thanks for listening, and remember to subscribe to receive podcasts every week. And today's listener review comes from E. Masterson on iTunes. He says, "Great podcast with great host. I learn a lot from it. Gray does a very good job of bringing a diversity of people with different ways of thinking." And to that, I have to say thank you, E. Masterson. I really appreciate it. And for the rest of you, you can possibly do the same. You can write me a review on iTunes on what you think about the podcast. It helps me improve, and it's really great, and I'll read it. I'm actually recording this on Valentine's Day, so I have to say happy Valentine's Day to everyone out there if it has anything to do with you. For other single guys like myself and other single girls, I think happy normal day. To me, it's pretty much just a normal day. But anyway, have fun, and thanks again for listening.
Yes, but I was in Cape Town 3 years ago.
How did you find it?
Well, I thought it was great seeing the ostriches, feeding them, seeing how many different types of wildlife did I see in one day? Penguins, and some other types, going to the actual Cape. Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
Right. What did you come for work, or it was just a visit?
Well, my whole life is for fun, but I got invited to speak in a panel discussion hosted by the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences, which is in Muizenberg, if I pronounced that correctly.
Muizenberg, yeah. Nearly.
Yeah.
You're right.
And while I was there, I also gave a talk at Stellenbosch University.
So first of all, what's your resume? If somebody asks you what do you do for a living, how do you answer the question?
I'm a mathematician.
A very good one-line answer, but then what does the mathematician do?
Mathematics.
Really?
What I do is I do research in mathematics, and I mostly pure research, although I've been attempting to get millions of dollars in grant funding by doing some applied research applied to counterterrorism. But I consider myself a pure mathematician, which means that the work I do need not have any connection to the real world. It's just very interesting to me and hopefully a couple other people. But it should go without saying, but I'll say it. I'm just speaking for myself as an individual, not for any institution or company, including ones that I might have co-founded. But I do teach students as well. So when you talk about how do you earn a living as opposed to what do you do, it's because I earn a living through teaching and doing research in mathematics.
Okay, yeah, that's a very great answer. I kind of understand now. But then if you say the things you do are kind of interesting to you, why is that important to you that you pursue those things?
The point of life is to enjoy life. So I would actually do mathematics even if I weren't being paid to do it. That's what I love to do. I think love to do most of all. In fact, I think I love mathematics more than I love people.
Okay, well, yeah, that's great. So let's take it back. Let's reverse a little bit. How did you ended up being a mathematician?
I'm not entirely certain how I wound up with an interest in math. It could be because even when I was a little boy, like around 7 years old, I'm in my parents' house right now for a vacation. And in the room next door, there's a book which my father taught me from. It was a math book, and he would have me convert from Roman numerals to Hindu Arabic numerals and vice versa, or adding up how much money you have if you have different types of coins. So I remember that from when I was 7, maybe even younger. But the actual time when I decided I was going to become a mathematician was when I was 14. It was actually in English class, in literature class. It wasn't because I didn't like English, but all the students were given a questionnaire to fill out, and the result of that questionnaire was supposed to be your ideal vocation. So I dutifully answered the questions, and the result that I got was that I should become a mathematician or a statistician. And at the time, I didn't really know what statistics entailed. I didn't really think it was that interesting. So my eyes fell on the mathematician part. And since my parents were both university professors, naturally I thought of becoming a mathematics professor as opposed to, say, a mathematician working in industry somewhere.
Right. So I'm just going to ask this other question again because I know that some of the listeners are still not going to understand it. There's still kind of a mystery of when somebody says I'm a mathematician. There's always a question of what do you do? So just walk us through what's your day comprised of?
All right, my day is comprised of watching YouTube videos and lately Katy Perry videos. But on occasion, I try to actually do some work. There's a book by someone named Kevin Kruse, has something like time saving secrets of billionaires and straight A students and entrepreneurs. Mark Cuban, that was one of the billionaires that Kevin Kruse mentioned in the title of his book. He also mentioned straight A students in the title of his book. I was not one of the billionaires. I was one of the straight A students, or former straight A students. Well, almost straight A student. And if you count A minuses as A's, then straight A student. And but from this book, I learned some of these time-saving secrets or time management secrets. And one of them was to create a timetable for each day, plan out your day in advance. And so now, because of that book, I plan out, say, 2 hours in the morning when I'm just going to read mathematics, either a mathematics research article or from something from a mathematics book if I'm trying to learn a new branch of mathematics. For example, it might be the book Basic Algebra 1, but that's not the basic algebra you might remember from high school. It's actually advanced mathematics. They just have that title for the book. So that's what I'll do. Later, I might actually try to do some, if I'm at the right stage of my work, original mathematics. I might try to solve a particular mathematics problem. I might have some ideas that I scribble down in a notebook. I've got probably a dozen, maybe 2 dozen of these notebooks now over the course of my career, where I try to pen out theorems, new theorems. Sometimes they're not correct. There's a saying that I may have heard from someone else, but at 2 a.m., all theorems are true, or all conjectures are true. What I mean by that is that at 2 in the morning, you think you have something, but then you wake up the next morning and try to confirm it, and you see that you made a mistake somewhere. So being a mathematician involves lots of ups and downs. Some people, a friend once told me that she could even hear it in my voice when I'd be at a high thinking that I'd proven some nice theorem, and then at a low when I realized there was some kind of mistake. But everybody makes mistakes, even the great ones. What I did most recently in the last 24 hours or so is there's an old paper by a professor at Oxford University, and he had what he thought was a neat proof of someone else's result, a very short proof, but I have proven that that professor's proof was wrong. Jeez. Now, that has to be checked by other people. I have to check it again myself, but I'm pretty confident that I'm right. So everybody can make mistakes.
Right. So I come from the tech side of the world, whereas if I think of a mathematician, usually it's the guys behind creating algorithms to solve a certain problem, right? And you don't seem to come from that side of things. So what are the problems that you're actually trying to solve? I'm trying to speak objectively or subjectively, in other words, that to make other people understand, including myself.
Okay. Well, it's kind of hard to describe a lot of math over the phone. You need to write things down, and even when you write them down, there are usually lots and lots of definitions that the listener needs to be familiar with before he has a chance of comprehending what it is you're talking about.
Right.
But there's one particular problem that I like very much called the wide partition conjecture. I first heard about this conjecture when I was visiting associate professor of applied mathematics at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which people from around the world might know about from movies like Good Will Hunting or Beautiful Mind. But I was in the applied math lounge one day, and a famous Stanford mathematician, a computer scientist too, named Don Knuth, was at the chalkboard. And some people, I think they were grad students or postdoctoral fellows, were explaining to him the wide partition conjecture. And what it is like a generalization or a modification, an analog of the game of Sudoku. In Sudoku, you've got a 9x9 grid, and you want to put the numbers 1 through 9 in each row and each column so that no number appears twice in a row or column, and there's some other conditions. Well, with the wide partition conjecture, you don't have a 9x9 grid. You've got a bunch of boxes, maybe 9 boxes in the first row, but the second row might only have 8 boxes, and the next row might have 3 boxes. It can vary. As long as the number of boxes in each row decreases. Or you can have 2 or more boxes with the same number, but it can never increase. So you might have one row with 8 boxes, the next row has 8 boxes, the next row has 3 boxes, the next row has 2 boxes, and maybe the bottom row also has 2 boxes. And you want to left justify all the boxes and put in numbers so that no number appears twice in a row or column. But what numbers are you allowed? In each row, if the row has, say, 7 boxes, you have to use the numbers from 1 to 7. If a row has 4 boxes, you have to use the numbers from 1 to 4. And so sometimes you can actually put in those numbers so that no number appears twice in a row or column. And sometimes you can't. For example, what if you have a row with one box above another row with exactly one box? Then because each row has one box, you can only use the number 1. But then if you have 1 and then 1, you've got the same number in the same column. But other times you can obviously do it, like if you have a 9 by 9 square. So every row has the numbers 1 through 9 in it. Obviously you can fill in that 9 by 9 grid so that no number appears twice in a row or column. So the wide partition conjecture gives a criterion, which is too complicated for me to explain over the phone, for when you can fill in this collection of boxes. It's called a Young diagram. When you can fill in a Young diagram in this Sudoku-like fashion, and when you can't. And I've been working on that for the past 13, 14 years now. And I don't have an answer, but that's one of the problems that I would be thinking about.
Right. That sounds pretty complicated.
And that's one of the simpler ones.
Oh, yeah. So, you
to describe at least.
Okay, yeah, I guess. And when did you actually decided that at what age did you thought to say you want to make math as a profession?
That would be age 14.
Right. So were you like a student who parents were pushing, or teachers pushing you that direction because they knew that you were good at maths, or you actually decided on your own?
No, that was my own decision. Our parents actually never pushed us. So we were led in that direction by their example, but they never pushed us.
All right. And were you like the best students in maths in like high school or in your preschool?
I would say I had 2 friends who also did very well in math, Jeff and John, and so the 3 of us tended to go to, say, math league competitions. So in high school, I got chosen to go to a state competition. And so my friend John Noonan came along. So it was mostly the 3 of us who were in the advanced classes from what I remember. And I had another friend, Tony Harkin, who was also with us, if I remember correctly, although this was quite some time ago. And John Noonan, Tony Harkin, and I all became math professors.
And then did you had any aspirations apart from being a mathematician, or role models in that sense?
How do you mean?
Like, did you had any type of role models, people that you looked up to that you wanted to be like?
Well, I guess my parents.
What were your parents doing?
Well, my parents are university professors.
That makes a lot of sense. And
Yes.
did you had any other goals that you wanted to achieve as in a professional ways?
In a professional way, no. Outside of the profession, at the time, now I'm very jaded and cynical, but at the time I was interested in, I was like a Pan-Africanist, if that's the right word. So I idolized people like Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, later Huey Newton, and so I wanted to actually, the way I would view it, it might seem comical now, I wanted to redeem Africa and have Africa claim her place, her rightful place among nations, and sort of like the way China went from being this backward semi-colony, as I think Sun Yat-sen put it, but now as a leading nation. And I thought the same could be done with the continent of Africa, but perhaps led, since my parents came from the West Indies, by a successful nation in the West Indies like Jamaica. So for decades, I had this fantasy of becoming Prime Minister of Jamaica and improving the country so that it was, just as we have the East Asian tigers, places like Singapore or South Korea, I thought we could have the West Indian crocodiles. But I no longer have those kinds of political aspirations or concerns.
And then, how different was it for you as an African American to be in the field of mathematics? That's quite uncommon, to be honest, and especially back in the days. I guess it was.
Yeah, there weren't many, but precisely because my parents came from the West Indies, I myself did not have any thoughts about, oh, this is unusual, because I knew it wasn't. Because uh, every university in Africa is populated by black mathematicians. So just because in America, a small percentage of the world population, it's unusual, it doesn't mean it's unusual overall. So I never thought that way. In fact, I always was kind of vaguely disgusted by people who did think that way. But I think that's one reason why you see in America a lot of immigrants, whether from Africa or from the Caribbean, being more successful, because they don't have that they're not hamstrung by this "I can't" attitude.
That's a really good observation, actually, and that's true.
So, for example,
yeah,
when I was a professor at Vanderbilt University, which is in the southern part of the United States, which is the most racist part, especially historically, there was a student from the Black Student Association who even said at one point, when she was making a public comment somewhere, some kind of forum, about how people don't think you can do this or that. And I was thinking when she said this, well, people don't think that. Maybe some racists think that. But it would never occur to me to think people don't think that I, as a black person, can do X or Y. I would always narrowly restrict it. Yeah, there are some racists out there who might think that I can't do it. Who cares about them? I mean, as long as they stay out of my way. And if they're in my way, God help them.
And then in your childhood, I'm still curious about how this whole thing started. In your childhood, did you had any of your parents? What did your parents wanted you to become?
My parents didn't have any. I don't even recall even thinking about what my parents wanted me to become, or them uttering anything like that. I don't think they ever even implied anything like that. My parents wanted me to be successful. Typically, people from the Caribbean would go into professions with some kind of prestige. I don't know, there might be doctors, but there might be, they'll do well in academia, might become university professors. But no, my parents never said this is what we want you to become, and they never implied this is what we want you to become, other than academically successful and professionally successful.
Right. And do you think that anybody can learn mathematics, or it's kind of one has to be gifted?
I think that only a small number of people would want to learn mathematics at an advanced level. I think that it's like having a taste for a particular strange type of food. So everybody likes vanilla ice cream. Maybe everybody doesn't like green tea ice cream. I don't know. And so if you like math, you like broccoli flavored ice cream. But it's not for everybody. Now, can everyone learn math at a certain level? Obviously some people might have difficulty learning any subject. I have difficulty learning languages. But at the very basic level, I think if people just do drills, which doing drills is not in vogue these days in the American educational, amongst education so-called experts in America. But you do enough drills, I think you're going to get it. At the advanced level, I am confident that if someone has a certain facility with math and a willingness to work, I could train such a person so that they could be amongst the best mathematicians in the world. Now, I'm not saying that I am. I'm saying that the way it works is the academic community loves the Wunderkind, and that's the person who, they just know more than other people at their age. And I also know what academics like in the world of mathematics. So I could take a young person and show that person, this is what you need to learn in order to be successful in the world of academia.
In what other ways do you use your knowledge in mathematics in the real world?
So in the real world, as I said, I do work involving counterterrorism, and I'm quite pleased, you might almost say proud, to say that people who actually do work in counterterrorism or law enforcement have used my work. For example, someone who's now a colonel in the United States Air Force said something like, my ideas have influenced real-world decisions of the highest operational importance to the Department of Defense. And Dr. Kevin Blake, who used to head the National Intelligence Bureau for Jamaica, this was part of Jamaica's Ministry of National Security, he actually used my ideas, according to the Jamaica Observer newspaper, to break up at least one criminal gang. It wasn't a terrorist organization, but it was some kind of smuggling group. So I'm quite pleased that my ideas have actually been used in the real world, and they could be used even more.
So you recently, I don't know if it's recent, but you came up with a formula to eliminate ISIS. I mean,
that was what, a British publication had that headline. I've been doing work in this area since about 2003, but I have the ideas could be used to analyze the structure or the chains of command of hostile organizations. So in the U.S., they don't like ISIS. It could be used to analyze the structure of the command for groups like ISIS. Yes.
So how would you explain the relationship between mathematics and military? I really don't see the connection there on how does the strategy work?
So how it works is you would have you try to map out the chain of command for say a terrorist organization. So there's going to be a leader. That person will be directly communicating to his immediate subordinates. They would be communicating directly with their immediate subordinates, and so on. And in my model, which would have to be verified by empirical data, eventually orders will go from the leader down to a foot soldier. This might be a person who goes around and plants bombs, say. And how can you prevent these orders from being carried out? Well, you could capture some intermediaries, but there might be many ways, multiple ways. You could capture the leader, of course, or capture the foot soldier. But you could also interrupt the chain of command or break the chain of command. Now, there might be many ways to pass commands from the leader or leaders down to foot soldiers. And so you'd want to capture enough people from the terrorist cell so that you've broken all of those chains of command. And so in my model, that's called disabling the cell. But the model might not be accurate. So someone who actually does deal with terrorist cells would have to somehow confirm, yeah, this part is right, or maybe the model needs some modification or massaging. And I'm perfectly willing to accept that, and I'm open to that. As I said, this isn't just theoretical pie in the sky because of the statements by this U.S. Air Force colonel and also the former head of Jamaica's National Intelligence Bureau.
What is the difficulty to discover new things in the field of math and science?
Well, I guess I can say more about math than I can about science generally. You can discover new things very easily if you're working in an area that nobody cares about. You might even just inventing your own kind of math. This actually historically has been what mathematicians do. In centuries gone by, mathematicians weren't thinking, oh boy, I've got to get tenure, so that means I have to do work that this other famous and powerful person likes, or I'll never get ahead. They just worked on what they liked. But with the advent of this university system, this tenure system, then people were sort of more constrained. And so now to do something new in an area that's been that's been worked over, that people have done a lot of work in for a century, I think it's hard to come up with something that's really significant, but it does happen on occasion. My field is called lattice theory. I love this field, but it's kind of a dying field. It emerged in the 19th century, but it really got a boost in the 1930s or so with my undergraduate thesis advisor, Garrett Burkhoff, being a pioneer in the subject in the 1930s. But it reached the stage so that by the 1990s, even though Professor Burkhoff was my undergraduate thesis advisor, he really had to come out of retirement, not had to, he did come out of retirement basically to supervise my undergraduate thesis because there wasn't anyone on the faculty who was doing that kind of work. So when you're in this kind of area, there are fewer people working in it, so that maybe you could make some advances, but at the same time, there may not be as much of an impact as there would be if you were working in a more popular field and yet making what seems to be a smaller contribution. But I love lattice theory, so that's why I work in it. And what I try to do is find ways to connect lattice theory with more popular branches of mathematics, such as combinatorics, which is what I've done. So I've solved in my career problems posed by people like Richard Stanley, who's a professor at MIT. He's actually in the field of combinatorics, but some of his problems related to lattice theory, so I could work on those and solve them. I've also tried to bypass academia altogether by trying to find an application of lattice theory to problems like counterterrorism. Actually, a 2012 Nobel laureate in economics did work related to lattice theory. In fact, that person, his name is Alvin Roth, his first paper, as far as I can tell, was a paper in lattice theory. So there are connections between lattice theory and economics even. So I'm hoping to revive the field of lattice theory by encouraging students to work on these connections between lattice theory and not just other branches of mathematics, but other areas of inquiry, and not just within academia, but areas that might actually be useful to people.
Incredible. And then after you finished high school, sorry to go back in time again, after you finished high school, how was your transition to tertiary education? Did you spend a year or two trying to figure things out, or you just went straight in?
I went straight in. So I have three brothers. They're all older. And each of them went to Harvard in some capacity. Two of them went to Harvard Law School. Two of them went to the Harvard as undergraduates. One of them went to both. That's why we have 2 + 2 doesn't equal 3. And so they could tell me what I needed to do. And they did. My brother Felipe, for example, told me to read these books by these philosophers, or actually there's one book in particular which summarized like Western thought, famous philosophers, so that I wouldn't feel lost when engaging in conversations with other Harvard students. In fact, I remember at breakfast having a discussion about Kierkegaard with this one student, and he wasn't a philosophy major, he was a physics major. And so I was prepared, and I knew enough, and I actually have a webinar called How to Get Straight A's in College, and it applies even to a difficult place like Harvard, How to Get Straight A's at Harvard. And you just prepare for the courses in advance. You make sure you find out about who the professor is, what's on the syllabus, try to do as much of the reading as you can ahead of the semester, before the semester begins. And that maximizes your chances of getting an A in the course. So there are many other tricks. It's a talk that I've given many times over the last 2 decades, and it could be a 4-hour talk. But in a nutshell, those are the techniques that I employed to do well at Harvard.
Right. And then how did it feel like knowing that you're really good at math, which is in some way genius? How did you recognize that, or you actually didn't care at all? Or you
Well,
felt some kind of special?
Well, one of the most popular professional sports in America is American football. And there's a player who plays for the Baltimore Ravens who actually is doing a PhD in math as well. And he actually sent me an email about a year ago saying that he thinks that I am someone that he thinks he should meet. But he made this comment once about how everybody who does math is called a genius. And so we don't really take it seriously. And this is the great thing about going to a place like Harvard, because I have seen real geniuses. So I don't consider myself that. I'm not even sure if my IQ even meets the criterion. There's some official cutoff point for groups like Mensa. I don't think I make it. But I don't really care so much about what people's IQ, what their IQs are. I care about what they have done, what they can do. And I've seen people who are really amazing, like people who learned quantum field theory in high school, people who could solve math problems posed by some of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century during the break in a conference, during the coffee break. So those are the people that I've met. But the stereotype is true that we see about mathematicians in plays like Proof by David Auburn, a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright. They have a kind of balance, or maybe they're sort of off balance. So someone who can do these amazing feats in mathematics might also not know, I don't know, that Poland was involved in World War II, something like that. So so there's this balance. But yeah, I've met people who are incredible in math. I know I'm not at that stage. What I am pleased about is that these same people who are incredible in math, I could solve some of their problems. So problems that they couldn't solve, I solved.
Awesome. Actually, I was chatting to my friend about kind of this subject with my friend Rad, the one who I just read his question recently. We were saying that people who grow up in a small school somewhere, that they're pretty smart, they're considered smart in those areas, doing well in high school, and then they go to a university like Harvard, and then you see a lot of people that are actually way smarter than you. Then they become confused. Like, you grew up thinking that you're probably the best, and then you realize that you actually not even up on the radar. I don't know if you ever recognize those patterns among other people or yourself.
I saw that with other people. There are lots of people who, I think half of the people who go to Harvard were either valedictorians or salutatorians in their high school classes. But obviously, there are usually about 1,600 people in a graduating class at Harvard. 800 of them can't be number one or number two. Only 2 people can be number one and number 2. So a lot of those people I did see got blown away. There was a math course that I took my freshman year called Math 25. It was the course that I actually didn't take it. I audited it. I sat in on it. But a lot of people who were math gods would take that course. And then they would get destroyed because the course wasn't designed for anyone to do well except people who would already learn the material. But I probably got more out of it than others because I went to all the lectures, and other people would skip lectures if they had a problem set due that day. In fact, one student who took the course even borrowed my notes. And so these people were, I could see that these people were really confounded and confused. I never had that attitude. It's weird. Now in retrospect, I guess, but I never had that attitude. Sure, I did well in high school. High school was pretty easy, but I never had this idea, I'm the best or something like that. I never had that attitude. And at Harvard, I was pleased that I could do well and better than these other people. But in many cases, for example, my grade point average was the second highest in my graduating class. But that's a combination of the strategies that was a result of the strategies that I employed to get A's. Doesn't mean that I am smarter than everyone else. No, absolutely not. But what I like about mathematics is that if you solve a math problem, it's pretty objective. So I am happy that I was able to solve math problems by people who are considered to be some of the greatest living mathematicians or highly esteemed living mathematicians. So I am not one of those highly esteemed living mathematicians, but I am pleased that I was able to solve problems posed by such people.
How long does it take on average to solve a math problem at your level?
Well, I've been working on the wide partition conjecture since 2003, and I haven't solved it yet. But there was a problem that I worked on for 13 years before finding the proof. But it wasn't a widely publicized one. It was a question that I was asked by an esteemed mathematician, Anders Björner, but I didn't actually. It wasn't published. But other problems that were published, I remember one problem of Richard Stanley at MIT that I worked on for 3 years. There was another problem by a famous universal algebraist named George Gretzer. He posed this problem back in 1964. I solved it some 34 years later, but I first thought about it. But the time between when I first thought about it and when I solved it was 2.5 years. But I wasn't working on it for 2.5 years. I worked on it for a semester, so a couple of months, stopped, and then 2.5 years later, I was inspired. I had an epiphany, and I worked on it for a week and then solved it. So did I work on that problem for a few months plus a week, or did I work on it for 2.5 years? That's a question for, I guess, people who study psychology.
That's really interesting. How often do those kind of epiphanies happen, where you solve something for a long time and it just happens that in a day or two you suddenly finished it at once?
It doesn't happen that often. There was another occasion when I got a result dealing with counterterrorism that I had been thinking about for a couple years. Again, not continuously, but I had a deadline because I was invited to speak at a conference in Canada, and they were publishing the proceedings, and so I had to come up with something. And right when the deadline was, maybe a week away, I had the result came into my head. But so it doesn't happen that often, actually.
Right. Sounds like the way I do everything, it's almost on the deadline. Then I actually end up getting it right.
Yeah. Yes.
So there's a question as well from a friend of mine, Callie. He's, I think, an astrophysicist himself. He said, what was your motivation in developing such a formula to eliminate ISIS? Was it religious, political, humanitarian?
Actually, the formula, the idea, the mathematical model is really what I should call it. The mathematical model was formulated to address, it could be used to tackle any kind of organization. You could have an organization working for France, and if a number of people fall sick, can you still get work done or something like that? That's an idea that someone gave me for how my ideas could be applied. So it's not necessarily ISIS, it's not necessarily even terrorism, but I did develop it to address terrorism. But ISIS is the group people are talking about. But hearkening back to my Marcus Garvey, my days of admiring Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X, I myself like to be careful because I'm not so silly that I believe all of the Western propaganda. So I wouldn't necessarily say, the New York Times says I have to hate ISIS, therefore I hate ISIS. I really don't. I'm neutral until someone gives me information that I know is accurate. But because I'm no longer, because I'm very cynical now, I live in America. We have the military-industrial complex. So if the Pentagon wants to give me $10 million to further my research, I'll take it. And if Jamaica wants to give me, I want more than 10 million Jamaican dollars. But if they want to give me 100 million Jamaican dollars, actually probably should be a billion Jamaican dollars, I'd be happy to take that as well. So I'm very cynical now. It's not that I'll do anything for money, but I want to do math, and I like to do math with the least amount of I'd like to be as free as possible to do math, and you're freer if you don't have financial concerns.
Absolutely. So when you're doing the counterterrorism, are you using your thinking as a mathematician to just think in a mathematical way, or you actually use mathematical formulas to analyze and work on these problems?
So I'm not quite sure what your question is.
Okay, my question is, if you're dealing with counterterrorism, are you on the board writing formulas or algorithms, or you just think, and with your help of mathematics, you think in a certain way that helps you to come to a certain conclusion?
Okay, so in my specific work, I am proving theorems about what, say, the structure of the ideal terrorist cell would be, subject to certain constraints that I haven't mentioned on the phone, subject to the conditions of my model. And so I'm actually doing math, and that's other people use math for military purposes. In fact, at the second conference on mathematical methods in counterterrorism that I co-organized, one of our attendees was the head of a branch of the Army Research Lab, the Survivability and Lethality Analysis Directorate. The Army Research Lab has about 5 or 6 directorates. So the head of one of the directorates of the Army Research Lab was there at our meeting. So you can use math in lots of different ways in the military. But I was taking it one step further, and I was actually trying to prove some theorems. But I encourage other ways of using math to address issues related to terrorism so I might push other people along in different directions. So at the third conference on mathematical methods in counterterrorism, I had a number of speakers who were using math to address port security issues. So you don't want someone to bring a dirty bomb into the port of Los Angeles, or Long Beach, and but you can't open up every container. It takes too long, costs too much money. So these people, not me, but these other people developed ways for algorithms to try to improve safety without increasing costs too much. And so I viewed my role as encouraging them not just to write articles in some obscure journal, but disseminating the information so that people like a man I met, the head of the Homeland Security for the Port of Long Beach, so that they could actually hear about this research and hopefully implement it.
Right. And in your personal opinion, what do you consider smart? What it means to be smart by your definition?
I would say someone like John von Neumann was smart. I haven't read a biography of him, but I think he could speak something like 25 languages, and he made these incredible contributions to many different areas. In addition to working on the first electronic computers, so very applied work, he also essentially proved Gödel's second incompleteness theorem about the same time as Gödel. One of the most amazing results in 20th century mathematics. So someone like John von Neumann, I would regard as being smart.
And is there a history of black mathematicians?
There is. I actually wrote an article for the Guardian newspaper called Black Mathematicians, the kinds of problems they wouldn't like to solve. So this is what's so bizarre. On the internet, you see these people, now we're calling them alt-rights, although that's not really a proper designation. But they're not necessarily racist in their totality, but there are fringe elements who are. And so there are people like Gavin McInnes who complain about black scientists being in movies and TV shows because, according to Gavin McInnes, this is completely unrealistic. Well, it's not unrealistic. I mean, as I said, every physics department on the continent of Africa is populated with African physicists. So it becomes just ridiculous to even that these people have this kind of problem. But you do hear about it. It's annoying to hear, but it's just absurd. But going back to antiquity, people like Euclid was an African mathematician. Eratosthenes was an African mathematician. So people like Fibonacci, he was born in modern day Algeria, if I remember correctly. And he is credited, if I remember correctly, with bringing the Hindu-Arabic numeral system to Europe. So he's taking African mathematics and bringing it to Europe. So I knew all of this stuff growing up, but most white mathematicians don't know any of this stuff. So they might believe some of the propaganda if they think about it at all.
Yeah, but then what do you think is the disconnect? That, I mean, it's not only the white mathematicians or white majority who doesn't know this stuff. Even Africans or African Americans who are unaware of all these people. Because I think it kind of it serves a purpose to have somebody in your own group who you can look up to that they actually did it. Then it's easier to have those kind of aspirations.
It is easier. And it's not absolutely necessary because the slaves were able to do things like Frederick Douglass without necessarily seeing others who could do it. But I agree. I have to concede that it's because I knew West Indians were doing were great in all these different areas that I knew that there was nothing special about my doing something. Like when I was at Oxford, I remember having a dinner conversation with a girl who was well-meaning. I liked her, but she was from Arkansas. And I told her just about one of my brothers, not even all three, just one of my brothers. And she said, "Oh, you have a shockingly upwardly mobile family." And I remember it was actually offensive what she said. Now I'm an easygoing guy, so I didn't tell her that was offensive. But it actually was an offensive statement. It's like, why are you assuming that this isn't downward? This isn't our family going downhill. That my brother my brother is just an attorney or something like that. But it helps if you know African history as well. So I know Haile Selassie is the 225th emperor of Ethiopia, so I don't have to pay attention to the Europeans when their civilization, which is 50 years old, does something that they began it all. So certainly correct African history should be taught more to everybody. The danger is that, unfortunately, a lot of Afrocentric people like to propagate myths about Africa as well. So they'll talk about Africans going to Mars or something like that instead of just sticking with what we know. So yes, we know we built the pyramids, we built Great Zimbabwe and stuff like that. We know about our advances in math and science. We have strong evidence for, traveling the Atlantic, going the other direction to China. But there's no need to make stuff up. But yes, the correct history should be taught.
Absolutely, I totally agree. It just kind of serves a purpose when I think these kind of people are exposed a little more, For example, this is a ridiculous example that I like to talk about, that every black kid think that they can become a rapper because it's just all around them. With absolutely no doubt,
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on. So, what would you want to accomplish in the next coming 5 years, for example?
So in the next 5 years, in order to free myself up, I am going to raise, let me now fix a figure, $2 million. So that with this money, I'm going to do a number of projects. I have some educational projects, but those ideas, I'm doing that mainly so that I have funding to do the research. And so I'm going to solve a major problem in mathematics. I'm working in a new area, or I'm going to learn more about a new area called homological algebra. And there's a famous French mathematician named Serre who posed a conjecture that I actually don't even understand the conjecture yet. I still have to learn more to even understand what the conjecture states, but I'm confident that I can solve it. There's a conjecture he has about something called positivity for a certain quantity. So that's something that I'm going to work on. But also along the way, there are smaller, less significant problems that I'm going to solve. So that's what is going to happen with me in the next 5 years.
Right. And for how long have you been in Africa before, or have you traveled here a lot?
The total amount of time that I've spent in Africa is about 6 weeks. In 1999, I got invited to speak at a conference in Johannesburg, South Africa. And along the way, I had a friend in Nashville, Nashville, Tennessee, USA, who called me her mentor. I didn't tell her to call me her mentor, but she called me her mentor. And when she found out that I was going to Johannesburg, she said I had to go to her native country, Swaziland. So she said that she'd have someone show me around. Little did I realize that the person she had in mind was the Swazi consul in Johannesburg, who personally drove me from Johannesburg to I can't even pronounce the name of the capital, Bambene.
Yeah,
the capital of Swaziland. And then in Swaziland, then the Minister for Enterprise scheduled lots of meetings for me. So I met the Minister of Agriculture, either the Minister or Deputy Minister of Tourism, and either the Minister or Deputy Minister for Education. And they had a group of people who ran the University of Swaziland. And so I met with them. So I didn't expect all of that, but I spent I think it was a week in Swaziland. And then the more recent trip from 3 years ago was paid for by the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences. They brought me over for their conference they had, but I spent a total of about 3 weeks in Cape Town. And afterwards, a representative of the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences contacted me because she wanted to use this slogan I had developed. This is what a mathematician looks like. So I have a campaign where female mathematicians hold up signs saying this is what a mathematician looks like. And the representative of the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences wanted to use that. And so she thought, now I don't have a copyright for it, but she thought it would be in good form just to ask me. And so as far as I know, they're using it, but they certainly planned to use it.
Right. So what do you think, how do you think mathematics should be taught in school? Or what is your general opinion on the current education system worldwide? Or maybe America and Africa?
So I'm not an expert on what it is worldwide. Certainly Singapore tends to top the list when people look at mathematical educational attainment for school kids. So that tells me it's a model that should be followed. In Britain, I know that even in high school, they learn advanced topics that you might not even learn as a math major at university, such as I remember seeing questions for high school students dealing with combinatorial optimization, something related to this wide partition conjecture, actually. The general field, at least. But in America, we don't do any of that. In America, the highest you're going to go is calculus. But not everybody needs calculus. If you're going to study engineering, sure, and obviously every math major should know it. But I would change the math system in America so that students can learn topics such as graph theory and not necessarily do calculus. What I love about graph theory is it deals with problems like this. Suppose you've got a map, and so like the risk board, you've got these different countries, and you want to be able to distinguish countries that are neighbors visually, with different colors. And so it turns out that if you can do this with just using 4 colors, if you only have red, blue, green, and yellow markers, you can actually take any map and color it so that adjacent territories have different colors. Now, maybe someone will come up with some weird example that doesn't satisfy this, but in general, this is how it works. This, though, was a hard theorem for mathematicians to prove. It took over a century. Eventually, actually, some computer scientists did it. It became known as the 4-color problem. Now it's the 4-color theorem. But that's part of this field of graph theory. And this is a problem that you can explain even to school kids. I've actually done so. And you can give them maps and have them play around and see if they can do it. And there are related questions. Also, logic. There is a series of books written by a logician named Raymond Smullyan. They're puzzle books. But they're fun. Like one of his books is called "What is the name of this book?" I have it right in front of me, in fact. But they're not just fun puzzle books. They actually teach real math. If you know the math, you know that they get to real math. So schools should actually use Raymond Smullyan's books as textbooks. There should be courses designed around it. And I think more students would be interested. More students would actually learn real math. And there might still be the question, what is this good for? I can't do anything about that. But I think it would be much more enjoyable than what students are learning now, and much more interesting. For example, today, a student might be shown a picture of a triangle, and it's clearly a right triangle. It has a 90-degree angle, but they're asked to prove somehow that it has a 90-degree angle. And the student might go, why? Because I can see that it's a right triangle. So students should be given more problems that don't force them or don't compel them to ask this question. Well, what? I don't really even see what the question is.
So, the reason I asked that question is that mathematics is on a knee-jerk reaction. Everybody says that they don't like math. It's hard.
Yes.
So how could you teach mathematics in a way that it's likable and people actually enjoy it? Because on the same topic, actually, do you think math is a science or it can be creative as well?
Actually, math is most definitely creative. Now, they use math in science, and mathematicians, in terms of their social skills, are more like scientists than they are like Van Gogh. But the actual process of doing math is more like art. It's more like poetry than it is engineering. You have to be creative to come up with a proof or of a theorem. But in math education circles today, there's this idea that math has to be fun. And I disagree with that. There's a certain amount of math that people need to learn, and they should just learn it. And they should get used to the idea that not everything is fun. It's like eating broccoli or eating broccoli flavored ice cream. Not everyone's going to enjoy it. The people who are going to enjoy it probably don't need any additional prompting. In fact, you probably need wild horses to keep them from doing math. The great mathematician Ramanujan, whom I'm going to make a movie about, when he was eating, his wife would feed him because he was too busy doing math. So someone like that, you don't need any special program to encourage them to go into math. But everybody needs to know a certain amount of math, and they should just get used to the idea that it's not necessarily going to be fun. Having said that, if they would teach math from the books of people like Raymond Smullyan, it would be more fun. If they would teach topics from graph theory and what's called discrete mathematics, I think it would be more interesting to students who are getting to the higher levels of math. It would be more interesting than just doing calculus, because we've always done calculus at the upper levels of high school math.
And also then on the way it's taught in general in schools is that you get they teach you a formula to get to a certain answer, and then they give you a problem. So you got to solve with a given formula that you know. So that kind of, I think, it doesn't become creative anymore once it comes to that. It's just like, okay, now you have these certain rules you can't break or anything.
You have to use what you're given to come up to a certain conclusion. But then if I look at other mathematical books or biographies by other people, it's like there's a lot of ways where, well, you can reach to a certain conclusion or the same conclusion using different formulas. But then that's not really encouraged. I don't understand why. I might just be naive or ignorant about it.
No, you're correct. There, at the basic level of math done at the school level is radically different from math done by researchers. In fact, it's again a question that psychologists should study. Why is it that people who are good at school math happen to also be good at research level math, or can be good at research level math? Because there's it seems to be so little connection, and you've isolated what that problem is. There's no creativity required at the high school level or the school level. You're given formulas and you're supposed to plug and chug. Now, there is something to that. If you're going to learn how to solve certain types of problems, then you've got to do drills. You've got to do 100 of them before you get it. But what I like to do is always explain to students the formula that they're using. So I try to prove to the students that this formula works, that it does what it's supposed to do, and then they can just use it. But that's the part where students sometimes get lost. Like, I wouldn't tell students just to use the Pythagorean theorem. I would prove to them that the Pythagorean theorem is true, and then they can use it to their heart's content, which, well, maybe not their heart's content because they might not want to use it at all. But then they can use it, I think.
Right. And then on the same subject, I hated math myself in school. I remember in my high school, even my primary school years. But then I remember a friend of mine teaching me something in math. And it just, on the specific subject that he taught me, it just made sense because of how he explained it. It wasn't exactly the way that I was taught by my math teacher. It was just the way he understood it by himself, so it kind of appealed to the way, I think he understood how I thought about it. Then he taught me from there. Then from there, I never lost it anymore. Yeah, and then I realized I had another, I don't know if it's an epiphany or whatever, but I had problems in math, but then I became interested in computers at one point in my life. I still am today. So once I generated the interest in computers, I was learning more about it. I was learning computer graphics specifically.
Cool.
Yeah, and then I reached to a level where I wanted to do a little more than I could do. Then I started playing with the programming languages that these programs use. And then I ended up liking math because it just made sense that this whole thing, that's how it's made, So it was like, I think I lacked the application for it, because when I was doing the computer graphics, I understood why I have to do it. So it wasn't as boring or as a chore where I just have to do it without no reason, just to get marks or something.
Yeah. So this is the problem with the way math is taught a lot of times. At the university level, a math professor doesn't need any additional motivation. He likes the broccoli flavored ice cream, but the students don't. And so the professor doesn't understand that. He understands the math, but he doesn't understand that the students need something extra in order to get it down. And that something extra is what you mentioned. I try to add information about history. So who were the mathematicians who came up with some of these formulas or theorems? But you can also focus on some applications. So actually, I majored in math, not just because I wanted to be a mathematician, but I was interested in your friend's subject, astrophysics, I was going to say Afrophysics, and also computer science, programming. And I thought if I did math, then I would still have the latitude to either become a physicist or go into computing. In the end, I just stayed in math. But I did do some programming as a kid, which I quite enjoyed. And I was interested also in computer graphics. There's some linear algebra that you need to, even if you've got a simple shape like a cube and you look at it from a different perspective, how should you be drawing the lines?
Absolutely.
There's some linear algebra involved there. So that should be mentioned in schools as well. I agree with you.
Yeah, because once I got that, I actually learned some math by myself. I did some research online and learned some math that I wouldn't actually learn if somebody just paused them on me.
Yeah, yeah. It's important to give a motivation. Also, when I teach even PhD students, I like to start off by telling them problems, maybe not problems I've solved, but problems in math. And then I teach the subject so that they have some idea in mind. And I'm against the American idea. We probably don't have this so much in South Africa, but the American idea of having students take a lot of courses before they start their research, PhD students, I mean, because then they're learning a bunch of math, which you do need to know to be a well-rounded mathematician, but there's no motivation. It's much better for them to start with a research problem and then realize, oh, in order to make progress on this problem, I need to learn this branch of math.
And then what do you think of that problem at like a primary school level at kids 6 or 7? Wouldn't that some kind of a way of learning work, of give them a problem, they must be solving something or so?
So at that level, I still am a fan of just giving them drills at the elementary school level. Maybe at the middle school, high school level, they could be told more, okay, you need to, when they're more rebellious and independent, they could be brought back onto the right track by telling them, okay, here's why you might be interested in this. I think elementary school kids would just have fun doing, or could have fun doing math, as long as they weren't given negative signals by the teacher. And one of the problems that you encountered also may have been due to the teacher not understanding the math. In America, I think a small percentage of teachers, math teachers, actually are qualified to teach math, actually have the right credentials to teach math. In New York City, I think it may even be something like 13%, because they're so short of math teachers, they'll have other people teaching math. And so those people are going to communicate their dislike, or at least their discomfort, the dislike of or discomfort with math, to the students. They might only know one way to explain a particular topic in math, when, as you indicated, there might be 3 or 4 different ways. And so that means the students are going to be confused if the teacher is confused.
Right. So for the other people that would want to become mathematicians themselves, what would you say they pay attention to?
So if you want to become a mathematician, such a person can contact me. I'd be happy to give advice. I find that my area of expertise is coming up with good problems for people to work on. When I was in grad school, I had a friend whose advisor gave him a problem that turned out to be harder than the hardest problem in mathematics, the generalized Riemann hypothesis. And he didn't. I mean, his professor didn't give it to him deliberately. He didn't know, but the student wasted 6 months of his time out of a 3-year course or 3 or 4 year course before realizing this. Whereas I like to give students problems that are such that if they only get partial results, they'll still have something that other mathematicians would care about, maybe even publishable results. So that's a skill that I've found not every advisor has. And so I've got a PhD student. I've given her some advice about what to do, and she won an award by a computing company, actually, VCalc. They gave her a $1,000 award. Now that may be small change. This is U.S. dollars. I can't do the conversion into rand, but it's a significant amount of money. And now if you're in computer science, it might not seem so big a deal, but in math, we tend not to make a huge amount. We're quite happy with our papers and pencils, which don't cost as much as fancy laptops and 3D printers. So I think that the proof is in the pudding, as it were. That I like to think that this is my ability. I can show students what to do who are aspiring mathematicians.
Right. And there's this other idea that I've been preaching for a while now. I just want to kick it on you and see what you think about it. In Africa, we have so many problems in a lot of countries. I grew up in Malawi. I don't know if you're familiar with that country.
I've never been there.
Okay, it's just a few countries out of South Africa. You go through Zimbabwe and you go through Mozambique and you're in Malawi afterwards. It's pretty close, like 1,500 kilometers or so from Johannesburg.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you get kids that go to school from households where they don't have clean water or electricity, and they go to school and learn about Shakespeare. I personally have a problem with that. I think it would be more helpful if the kids were learning things that would be more helpful and practical in their everyday life, that they would be able to solve their own problems that they face every day. But our education system here is pretty much like the American or the United Kingdom education system, which addresses very, very different problems, which we don't have or we don't need to solve now. We have a different set of problems. I don't know what you think of that.
Well, in the United States, there was a similar debate at the beginning of the 20th century. So there were two people, I think they were both former slaves, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. And they thought that the freed slaves should, or one of them thought that the freed slaves should be learning subjects like Latin and whatnot. That was W.E.B. Du Bois. And the other, Booker T. Washington, thought, no, this is absolutely ridiculous. They should be learning skills. They should make themselves indispensable to the world so that the world wants what they can do or what they can produce. And then he thought that all the problems of racial discrimination would be less relevant, maybe even fall away entirely. And so for a century, to be called like a Booker T. Washington was almost an insult because W.E.B. Du Bois won the debate. But now when we look at the African American community and the terrible shape that it's in, I am inclined to support Booker T. Washington. So people should have been learning how to make themselves indispensable. They should have been learning trades. They should have been learning even science, but something that would make them useful to the rest of the world. So in that sense, I agree that's how the education in Malawi should be. At the same time, I am an academic, some might say an intellectual, and so I don't want to say, no one should learn Shakespeare. There are elements of Shakespeare that are universal and important. Of course, they should be learning their own Malawian literature as well, but and poetry and so forth. Primarily at this juncture, with so many African countries being so poor, we need to make a great leap forward, like they did in China. And the way to do that is through technology right now.
Absolutely.
First of all, people need to live. So yes, they need clean water, and we need to figure out ways they can have access to basic sanitation. The next step, maybe these are, the Maslow's in Maslow's hierarchy. But so first they need that, but then secondly, they need to make themselves indispensable. And the way I see to do that is through technology. And then, but it's also the case that there might be some political science needed, because you could have a situation like Austria after World War II, where they had to make sure they weren't basically split apart and sent to the four winds, or France after Napoleon. Somebody needs to negotiate, and right now Africa is split up. The Western countries can come and take our valuable resource. I say our. So that's the Marcus Garvey in me.
I just see that. Yeah.
They think they can come in and take the African resources at will, and somebody needs to do the thinking. How can we prevent that? Right now, we don't want to wind up like in Nkrumah, where they just overthrow the leader who says, no, Africa's for the Africans, or African resources are for Africans. But there must be some way to figure out, like, can we master their political system? Can we divide and conquer them and get them to be at odds with each other so that they're not dividing us up and causing us to fight each other and then more easily siphoning off our resources? Maybe someone in computer science could think of that. You can use math even to minimize conflicts between African countries. There are water conflicts in the Horn of Africa. There are ways of using mathematics. It's called fair division. There are theorems that people have proven, and you could actually apply it. Maybe if people in Africa could become masters of that type of mathematics, they then could go out to places where there are water conflicts in the Americas, as there are between, in the American Southwest, or even between different American states like North Carolina and South Carolina. They had a lawsuit between those two states within the United States. Millions of dollars are being spent. Any kind of consultant from the University of Malawi could then have taken some of that money and then brought it back to the people of Malawi.
Yeah, that's really good thinking. I like it. But then, do you think that United States of Africa would work? And if yes, how do you think it would?
It's been a long time since I studied the different, the political situations in Africa. So it's hard for me to say. Obviously, this was once my dream to have something like United States of Africa. But that was many decades ago that I had that dream. So I don't know now. It seems just so. First of all, as I said, as we both discussed, there are so many fundamental problems faced by African countries. It seems political unity is not a priority. And then secondly, there's always the danger of the CIA creating some kind of coup. So whenever you have a nationalist leader or a Pan-African leader, that tends to be what happens to them. In fact, I think Gaddafi was talking about it, something like United States of Africa, right? And we saw what happened to him.
Yes, yeah.
So so what Africa needs to do first is figure out a way to protect itself. And I try to be a nice guy. I don't like Machiavellian solutions. However, Machiavelli had ways of thinking that would be useful to Africans. And what they need in Africa is, how can we prevent the CIA or similar organizations from destabilizing us? And they should maybe perhaps study J. Edgar Hoover, the head of America's Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, who was a very dark character. Dark. That's racist, isn't it? He was a very evil man, but powerful. And maybe those evil but powerful techniques could work so that African countries would have the freedom to develop. So they could proceed without worrying about there being a coup or a civil war stoked by the usual practices of divide and conquer. And then once they develop some kind of technology. I'm not in technology. I'm not an engineer. I could change a light bulb. That's about it. But there's even 19th century technology from people like Tesla, which might be useful. Because Tesla was talking about wireless transmission of energy. I don't know if his devices have actually been shown to work, but maybe they could look at it. Maybe they could try to find his plans and then try to see what could be done today. They may not need. Yeah, so I'll stop there. But that I think would be a way forward. An easier way forward, other than, since it's more difficult to get 50 countries together than it is to get one country together, all we need is one black country to be a model. One Singapore, as I was saying, like a West Indian crocodile. And so if we could find that one place, it would actually lead the other African countries up. It may not be a country in Africa. It might be a West Indian country, but it would lead the other African countries up, I think.
Right. That's a very good way of looking at it also, that you need a model that works. So in the last 2 or 3 years, what has been the things that actually stood up to you, made you, I don't know if it would be technology advancements or anything that stood up to you that you're like, oh wow, in the last 2 years there have been this to be proud of. For me specifically, it would be
the improvement of the electric cars, and the Falcon going to the space station and coming back, landing back on Earth. That's what's been exciting to me. I don't know, to you, what are those things?
I'm going to give you a banal answer. I think that just life generally is great.
Yeah.
That, I think in the 18th century, the Europeans were talking about how this is the best of all possible worlds, and they had some philosophy behind why they thought that should be the case. But I think now we are living in perhaps the best of times. Hopefully it won't be followed by the worst of times, because at least in the Western world, you don't have civil wars, you don't have terrible plagues, you are reasonably secure in your home, your belongings. You can almost trust the banks. So I just think life is great. Generally, maybe in the next generation, if we run out of oil, or if the ice caps melt totally, things will change. Certainly only about 50 or 60 years ago, we had world wars, or wars ravaging large parts of the planet. And so life was terrible for lots of people. It's not great for people in large parts of Africa, unfortunately, but at least in the West, things are great. So I can't point to one specific thing like what you mentioned. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just going to jump into the questions from the listeners here. Before we close, sorry for taking too much of your time. I highly apologize. There's just so much that I would love to cover with you. Maybe we can arrange a part 2 at one point?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so for now, maybe let's just go into the questions from the listeners. What do you think of Trump and the new American government?
So Trump, when he announced that he was running for U.S. president, gave the first speech that I've heard in years, maybe even a decade or more, by a politician that I actually wanted to listen to. So he's quite entertaining. Obama gives speeches that are supposed to be eloquent, but if you actually listen to them, they don't say anything. They're quite empty. Now, a lot of the allegations made against Trump are just flat out lies. He has made some statements that I don't like. Some of his policies I don't at all approve of. But he's not as bad as what the mainstream American media. He's not as bad as the way they portray him. Certainly. So that's what I think.
Right.
So as the article in the British publication stated, I actually would, if Trump were to hire me, whether it's to be to work in the Department of Education or to apply my math for counterterrorism, I actually would work for the Trump administration without endorsing any bad policies that he might have. I would be willing to do that for Hillary Clinton administration. I just don't think Hillary Clinton would hire me.
Okay. What do you think she wouldn't hire you?
I think it's strange, but it's easier to reach the upper echelons of the Republican Party, Donald Trump's party, than it is to get anywhere close to the upper echelons of the Democratic Party, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton's party. They just don't listen for some reason. If you're their friend or something, then yeah, you can get somewhere. But with the Republican Party, you don't have to be their friend. I have met Reince Priebus, who is now, I think, Donald Trump's chief of staff. He was the chair of the Republican National Committee. I've met the co-chair of the Republican National Committee. I met the chief operating officer. Ben Carson, who is going to be the head of the Department of, I think, Health and Human Services. He mentioned my name in a speech in 2004. You can actually reach these people, but for the Democratic Party, you can't.
Right. So another question from Jay-Z The War, a friend of mine also asked, are you for Leonardo Euler or Carl Friedrich?
Okay, so there's Euler and Gauss. I like them both. They're both incredible mathematicians. Uh, but I think in my work I've probably used more of what Euler has done. Of course, Euler is, I think, even today in 2017, one of the most prolific mathematicians of the modern era, and maybe even all eras. And he's incredible because he also made a lot of his discoveries. For 30 years, he worked while he was blind.
What?
Um, yeah. So I never get down on myself. Whenever you think, oh boy, I've got it. Things are so bad for me. You can think about Euler. You can think about Ramanujan, who was half starving, but he also is one of the greatest mathematicians in the last several centuries that we know about. And then feel less sorry for yourself.
Right. Another question from the same guy says, your favorite equation, his personal favorite, is Euler's identity in complex numbers.
Okay, yeah, that's a neat one. And when I teach high school students, I think I actually did find a way of proving that for them. But do I have a favorite formula? To be perfectly honest, I can't really say that I do. There's a photograph that was taken of me and put on the cover of a textbook. It wasn't my textbook, but they used a photo of me. And that is a combinatorial reciprocity theorem of Richard Stanley, the professor at MIT that I mentioned. So that looks nice, but I actually don't even have it really memorized, so I can't really say it's my favorite formula. And the types of lattices that I work with are called distributive lattices. And so there's an identity, the distributive law, that one can write out. But it's not really so cool looking. It's just the identity that I use in a lot of my work.
Great. And do you think computers will take over the branch of mathematics? For example, a program like Wolfram Alpha that can solve complicated integrals faster than humans. And just to put some context on there to the listeners, Wolfram Alpha is kind of like a Google of mathematicians. Am I right?
Well, at this stage, computers can't take over take over the job of doing mathematics, not the mathematics that I do. So I have job security. I don't know if any grandchildren I have or won't have, but if anyone in 100 years' time will have job security, mathematicians, that is. I mentioned the four-color problem, which was solved by computer scientists. What they did was they wrote a program that could analyze some 1,000 different configurations, and then the computer checked and said, you only need four colors. But you needed a human being to write the computer program to figure out that you could reduce this infinite problem.
Yeah.
Because we weren't just talking about any map that existed for countries that on Earth. It was any map that could be drawn, could be Narnia. You needed a human being to come up with that reduction. So in the future, could computers actually take over from mathematicians? It's possible. It's also a philosophical question. It relates to Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Are human beings simply souped up computers? If so, there might still be some tasks that computers can't do. Of course, then we couldn't do them either. And if human beings are superior to computers, no matter how advanced computers might become, then we have some advantage. But we might have an advantage. It's in the realms of math that are so arcane and esoteric that it wouldn't really matter. If you're solving differential equations, certainly you need computers for that now. But there's the reasoning aspect, and computers can do some reasoning, but right now we don't have Skynet. They haven't become self-aware. They can do logic. They can perform logical steps, what we tell them to perform.
Absolutely. And which Millennium Prize problem do you think will be solved next?
Which one will be solved next?
Yeah.
I'm not really I don't really know all of them. I have a book on the Millennium Problems in an adjacent room. the one that was is closest to what I might be interested in. None of them are really that exciting to me, but the one that's closest to what I might be interested in is P versus NP. But how close that is to being solved, I have no idea. Incidentally, someone who did a PhD in lattice theory also became a leading figure in even formulating the notions of NP, if I remember correctly. Someone named Hardmanis, who I think is at Cornell. And I solved half of a problem that he posed in lattice theory. So P versus NP is the one that's most interesting to me, but I don't know how close it is to being solved.
Thanks so much for your time.
And thank you.
Cool.
And that was it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening. I have to go. And if you would want to check out the first interview I did with Dr. Farley, you're welcome to, in which he talks about marriage, specifically along the lines of why he thinks